Hey guys, I just quickly wanted to show you the easiest way to get direct links to some of the products that I use. If you go to my website, which is www.thoughtfuldots.com, and click on the Tools I Use tab up at the top, that will take you directly to my Amazon shop where I have added some of my most commonly used products. I hope you guys find this helpful. Let's get into today's video. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So I get asked the question a lot if I add any mediums to my paint to get the right consistency. So I'm going to be doing a video all about paint consistency. And to answer that question quickly, the answer is no, 99% of the time. So if you guys have followed me for a while, you know that I love Deco Art Americana. That is my paint of choice, and I have a ton of it, and I absolutely love it. So the main reason that I love Deco Art Americana specifically for dot painting is because I feel like it has the perfect consistency straight out of the bottle. So I have used various other different brands that you can find at the craft stores like Michael's or Hobby Lobby. And some of them are just either too thick, too thin, or there is an issue with some where they are a little bit sticky. I think it's Anita's brand. I think that's at Hobby Lobby. That one, they have such pretty colors, but it is a sticky paint. And when you make a dot and pull up, actually, I have some of that in the closet. I'm gonna go grab it so that I can show you that consistency and what I mean by sticky. Okay, so first I'm going to show you the consistency of the Deco Art Americana, which is my favorite and go-to. I pretty much like anything that is convenient, so I don't like to use paint that needs any type of medium because it's just very time consuming. I'm all about convenience, so once I found that Deco Art Americana was perfect for this type of painting, I just bought a ton of it, and that is typically what I use. But Folk Art is another great brand. They make a really good quality paint. It is just a little bit on the thick side, so it does need to be thinned down. So I'll show you the Deco Art Americana first. So when you pour it into a container, you can see that there are no peaks, no grooves. It's totally smooth and flat, and that is how you want it to look in your container. And then I'm just gonna pour some of the Folk Art so that you can see the difference even within the container. So just by pouring them, look at the difference. The Deco Art is nice and smooth and flat and liquidy. And this one you can see has shape and form to it, which means that it's gonna be a little bit too thick for dot painting. So I'm just gonna grab my tool. I'm gonna just use a dotting rod. I'm gonna dip it in the Deco Art. And you want a good amount on your tool. You want there to be a little mound that you can see underneath. And when we make a dot, we just kind of want to hover. And sometimes I do like a couple little movements like that to make sure that it's nice and circular. Then I'm going to show you the Folk Art straight out of the bottle. So even just now, as you dip it and pull up, you can see there's a peak underneath. Instead of that nice little mound with the Deco Art, we have a peak. And you can even see it in the paint here. When you lift up, it's leaving a little peak. That just means it's a little bit too thick. Okay, so the problem when the paint is too thick, it gets these little ripples in it. You see? To me, they're like little nipples. Nipples or ripples, whatever you want to call them. So it's not a completely smooth dot. It has a little bit of texture. Sometimes if the paint is really thick, it can actually leave like an actual peak. Folk art isn't that peaky, but it can be. And it's just not smooth. It's really hard to get a nice smooth circle. So it's just a little bit too thick, that folk art. That doesn't mean we can't use it. It just means that it needs to be thinned down a little bit. So when paint is a little bit too thick, you can use something like Liquitex fluid medium or a flow medium or anything that's going to make the paint more thin. So this is what I like to use if the paint is too thick. So that's the folk art. I'm just gonna add a little bit of that flow medium. I'm getting my mixing brush. I'm just going to mix that real quick. So when mixing, sometimes they can get a little bit of bubbles. I actually have one of those back massagers. I forget what they're called. It's like the Volt or something. I have a knockoff version that I got on Amazon. And sometimes if I am mixing paint like this, I do notice there gets bubbles sometimes. So I'll use that massager underneath just lightly, and it kind of like vibrates out some of the bubbles. So you can definitely do that. But I'm looking at the texture and consistency. So before, when I lift it up, it was leaving those peaks, and now it has a little bit of a peak, but it's going down very quickly. So that's a pretty good texture. We will dot to see. So it is more of a mound instead of a peak. It might be a little bit too thick, but let's dot first to see. Make sure you have a good amount. That's how you get those nice smooth dots. You have to make sure you have enough paint on your tool. And we're just kind of hovering or kissing the surface, and I like to tap a couple times. And that texture is much better. As you can see, there's still a little nipple as compared to the flatness of the deco art. So it just kind of depends the look that you're going for. I am going to add a little bit more of the fluid just to get it a little bit thinner, and that might have been too much, but we'll see. Okay, so I have heard people say that you want the consistency to be like yogurt, but I have to disagree because it really depends on what type of yogurt you eat. I eat Greek yogurt and it's really thick, and I can tell you that you don't want your paint to be the consistency of Greek yogurt. So take that with a grain of salt. But this actually looks like a great consistency. As you can see, when you pull up, there's no peaks. It's pretty liquidy. So I think that might be perfect. Let's go ahead and try. Yep, now we have a nice little mound under there, no peak. Perfect, and now that consistency is much more like the deco art. So again, if you do have a thicker paint like folk art, it's totally fine. You just want to get a fluid or flow medium to thin out the paint. So that is how they look. I also just want to give an example of what happens if you don't have enough paint. If you're just like dipping in the tip really lightly and dotting, the dots can like either show through the paper, it can be, I mean, they're not nearly as big either. I know a lot of people just like are really timid and really, and they push down hard. If you push down hard, that can cause problems. So if your dots are looking like this, you need more paint, and you just want to like hover over or kiss the surface. so that you're not totally touching down. I also want to show you another mistake. If your paint is too thick, okay, so we're gonna take this folk art straight out of the bottle, and I'm gonna show you if you don't get enough paint, say you're just like getting a little bit and pushing really hard. So if your paint is having these ripples like this, that means that you're either pushing down too hard or your paint is too thick, or both. So ripples, I feel like, yeah, are usually a combination of the two. So if you're getting ripples, I would try lightening up, well, actually try getting more paint on your tool and lightening up the pressure a bit, and not pushing down so hard and doing the hover. But also, I mean, that looks better than that, but this I can tell is still too thick. So yeah, if you have ripples, try lightening up on the pressure and kissing the surface instead of pushing down, and also try thinning your paint. That should help. I do want to show you something else. So really interesting, but most deco art is perfect right out of the bottle, except for whites. I don't know why. Some of them are fine, but like you can even hear that's so liquidy. So if your paint is too liquidy, watch how thin this is. It's just, that's so liquidy. So if your paint is too liquidy, you can use something like Liquitex Gloss Gel Medium. Mix with color to thicken. So if you need to thicken, you want some type of gel medium. So you can see how thick that is. Getting my mixing brush. So that was actually too much. I probably could have done with half the amount. So I'm just gonna put some more of the liquidy paint. Okay, so that looks better. It looks not too thick, not too thin. Not too much of a peak. It definitely has a little bit of a peak. So we'll dot and see if that is too much of a peak or if it's just right. So it does have a little bit of a peak there, so if that doesn't bother you, it's fine. The only other problem with like any little bit of a peak or a nipple, whatever you want to call it, if you have that peak, once it dries, if you go over with top dots, it can start looking funky. So it's better to just have nice, super smooth dots with no lump or peak, especially for top dots. It'll be a lot easier to do top dots if you don't have any peak. So we're gonna mix this one again and see if we can thin it a little bit more so that it's not doing those peaks. Okay, that looks a lot less peaky. And again, these little bubbles are normal. If you have some type of massager or something, you can just massage these out pretty easily. Okay, looks like those peaks are gone. And it's a lot more smooth, still a little bit of a peak, so you could thin that out a little bit more if you want it to be more flat. Okay, and then lastly, I did just want to show you this Anita's. I don't have any clean paint trays, so I apologize that this isn't very aesthetically pleasing. Okay, look at that. See? You can see how sticky and stringy that is. That is no bueno in my book, because when you are dotting, So if you pull up really fast, it's such a weird texture. But if you go slow, look at that string. That is just so annoying to me. So when you're dotting, it has these big long streaks. And I don't know, that may not bother you. But also, if you're walking the dots, it's gonna follow your dots, and that is like just really frustrating, I think. Because if you do it too, like it could string together like that, and we don't want that. So that's the Anita's. If that string doesn't bother you, then I think it might be fine. But to me, I tried using them and I did not like them. So yeah, my go-to Deco Art Americana. I also like folk art, but it needs to be thinned. Fluid medium to thin out your paint, and gel medium to thicken it. All right, I hope that helps. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to leave it in the comments below, and we will see you next time.